And we are only how many? We are waiting for others to join. 65 plus maybe 20, so around 80, 85. So I think we can start. And a quick reflection of what we did in the previous session.
Yes, sir.
We have tried to understand two problems that are most commonly there, but they are most commonly ignored by the researchers. The first problem that we discussed in the previous session was the challenge or the threat of non response bias. Non response bias is generally neglected because we feel that the people who have responded, we have to analyze their responses and to make a prediction about any theory or any phenomena or testing a theory. But the respondents who either do not opine to be a part of the study or who miss some part of the study or some unit of the study, what to do with them, how to deal with them, how to work upon missing frequency, how to handle the outliers. This was handled in the first part. In the second part, we discussed a bigger problem, bigger in the sense it is being encountered by most of the top researchers also, but it is mostly neglected because the person who is encountering this problem may not even aware of this problem. There was a question towards the end which says, how do we avoid it? How do we predict it? So, the answer that I gave, the problem of endogeneity, is that many times we even do not know that whether we have omitted any independent variable or not, or whether there is a two-way relationship, simultaneity between independent and dependent, or whether the precise measurement of the independent variable is there. So all these three, four things lead to the problem of endogeneity. And the most common approach to solve this problem is experimental design. Correct. In experimental design, we have generally two groups and we have counterfactual argument, which says that we can at least see that if we make an intervention in group 1, what are the outcomes, and in group 2, if we have not made, what are the possible outcomes. So that particular intervention or that particular independent variable creates a lot of what do you call as control over the other, because we are, and many times I told you experimental is avoided because of the time and money and other constraints. And the second solution to endogeneity was using something called as instrumental variable. An instrumental variable is used using a technique called as 2SLS. And we have talked about that it is important for us to find a equivalent instrument which is related to the independent but not correlated to the error term. And in that case, we solve the problem by using two step linear regression, two step rather least square, 2SLS, two step least square method. Correct. So 2SLS method is used using instrument variable to minimize the problem of endogeneity without getting into experimental research. Correct. And in this session, we'll be talking about the concepts which are again very fundamental, very important, but at times we do not pay heed to those variables or those problems. And precisely, we'll be talking about two concepts: the concept of validity and concept of reliability. Both these concepts are important, so we'll try to understand what is the origin, what are the things that we should know, and how should we achieve. Correct. Now these two things are a must whenever we are doing both kinds of research, whether it is quantitative or qualitative. Although the concept of validation is a little less discussed in qualitative research, but with respect to the quantitative research, I think both of them are equally talked, equally discussed, equally debated. I've shared my screen. In case it is visible, you can just give me a thumbs up or you can raise your hand. Is it visible?
No, sir.
It's not yet visible. Mm, I have to stop share again and then
Yeah, it's fine now, Sunil.
Yes, yes, sir.
visible.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Asaji. Thank you so much for the confirmation. Uh, Before getting into the concept of reliability and validity, I think there are 4 5 terms that I have written. Rather, the concept of latent variable. In the previous session, we talked about the term Likert scale, right? Or some people call it as Likert scale also. So we have used these two terms, Likert scale, in the previous. Now let's try to understand the basic concept of latent variable. And latent is a term which has come from physics, latent heat, concept of latent heat, etc. So latent is something which is unobserved, which is manifested, which is created by a certain set of observed statements. Correct. So we must know about what is it, and then the entire concept of reliability and validity revolves around the process of instrument design. Correct. So we either create an instrument of our own, or we generally use an instrument which is already created, already validated, and which is reliable. So we have to check if there is an existing instrument, what is their reliability, its reliability, and what is its validity. But if you are creating an instrument, then these two concepts becomes utmost important, utmost priority. Right? And then we'll talk about what are the various types of reliability and what are the various types of reliability and validity both. Correct. So my question to begin again this session, in order to see whether we are all sailing on the same boat, having the same understanding, is what is the meaning of construct? I think in the previous session I've just given you a highlight about three terms: concept, construct, and variable. I said a concept is a kind of phenomenon, a, any phenomenon which is discrete in nature, which is well defined. Correct. Concept of motivation, concept of leadership, concept of behavior, concept of this. So there are numerous concepts that we talk. Concept is generally a phenomena, correct? A process where we have a lot of observations, and if you sum those observations, it leads to a mental cognitive process, and that becomes kind of concept. And the construct, I told you there is a thin line of difference between the two. Construct is slightly ambiguous. Correct. So constructs are generally latent variables, and the entire concept of reliability and validity revolves around construct. So I think if you are aware of, I think most of us are aware of these research jargons. The fundamental jargon or the fundamental thing that I've said time and again is concept, construct, and variable. Then we should also be aware about the difference between hypothesis and proposition, because again we use these two terms exchangeably, interchangeably. And once we are aware about the difference between these three, we should know what are the various types of variables. And then what is the difference between theory and model. Correct. Because many times we get into high-end research, but these are the very fundamental terms, and some ignorance can take us to big challenges. Correct. So a concept, I have written it very briefly, is generally accepted collection of meanings or characteristics associated with an object, with an event, with a condition, with an situation. So if you observe any characteristics which are associated to a set of events, set of objects, it is called a concept. Physics में भी होगा, chemistry में भी होगा, everywhere you will have concepts. Gravity, gravitational force, all principles, Newton principles, everything there is a concept. Correct. So concepts are the characteristics associated to a specific event or an object or a condition or a situation
In social science or management, we generally revolve around behaviors, correct? The learning concept, motivation concept, leadership, or all any kinds of concept, values, behavior, and all this. But otherwise, in meta science or physics or other domains, we use events, objects, conditions. So concept is very broad term. Example I've given you: gravity, height, motivation, emotion, learning, everything is a kind of concept. Now, concept and constructs are, I told you, easily confused because there is a lot of overlapping between the two. Now, concept is concrete, discrete, and easily measured, whereas constructs are abstract and difficult to capture. Concepts are more or less, you can say, they are objective. There is a scientific formula normally, and that is why it is said in management or social science or behavioral science, we largely have constructs rather than concepts. Because concepts ka matlab, you are looking at things from the positivist point of view, from the point of view of an objective scientific researcher, whereas constructs basically are more subjective, correct? So you get into the constructivist approach or some other approaches in order to derive, define, and people may have disagreement. So for example, the concept of or construct of emotion may have three different definition. The construct of motivation may have different definition. The construct of buying behavior may have different definition. The construct of service quality may have different definition, different statements. So constructs are more abstract and slightly difficult to capture, and it varies from researcher to researcher, individual to individual. Again, the third term, which is variable, I've told you that in practice, variable is a synonym of a construct. The moment you get into your research, you will say ki it is a variable. But the difference between construct and a variable is the moment you try to empirically measure a construct, it generally becomes a variable. For example, I've given you, there is a variable called as learning organization, which is a multi-dimensional construct. So learning organization is a construct which has multiple dimensions, and you want to, because it can have different values, you are trying to measure it. The moment you try to measure it, it will become variable, correct? So variable is slightly same, correct? Now, if you can see, in the theoretical plane, we are calling them as construct. In the empirical plane, we are calling them as variables. And in the theoretical plane, the association between constructs is called as proposition. In the empirical plane, empirical world, it is called as hypothesis. So whenever we are writing a qualitative research paper, whenever we are saying that I have read this, my experience says this, my observation says this, and these two variables are correlated. So I am making a proposition that there exists an association. But whenever you are trying to test that proposition, you call it as hypothesis. I hope I am making sense to all. So the difference,
Yes, sir.
thank you. So hypothesis is a kind of proposition, but in an empirical. Empirical ka matlab hai, empirical simply means wherever you are collecting the primary data. Correct. Empirical means you are going to test a theory, test a relationship using primary data. Now, if you have variable, then you should know what are the types of variable. Now, there can be multiple differences, multiple types. For example, most common type of difference is dependent versus independent. This is something that I have been talking time and again. In the previous semester session also, I have said that in a regression equation, y is the dependent and x is an independent. So you may have multiple independent, one dependent. So whenever you are trying to understand a theory or do a model creation, you always have to identify which role is being played by this variable. Whether there are multiple independents, whether there are multiple dependents now, because earlier days there was a time when only one dependent used to dominate the research. But nowadays, since we are into SEM and all those techniques, so we may have multiple dependents also. Second kind of difference or kind of categorization between the variable is observed versus latent. Again, I have told you, observed variable is generally the statement that you make in a questionnaire. The statement that you draft, that you present to the respondent, is your observed variable. Latent means by virtue of those 3 to 5, 5 to 10, whatever is number of statement, if there is a broad variable which is latent, which is derived out of the reply or the response of the observed. So you are deriving the value of the latent variable through observed variable or observed statement. And the entire concept of reliability and validity revolves around latent variable. Next, you may have some different kinds of variable, mediating, moderating. I think this is something that we will not talk much about today because they will get into the advanced kind of research. But many times some variables take the shape of a mediator. So mediator means it is both. It is independent as well as dependent. Correct. So mediator means there is a direct effect and there is an indirect effect. Whereas moderator is a variable which tries to control the relationship between two variables. Correct. So mediation and moderation is something that is out of the discussion as of now, but we should just know about what are these two. Now, this is an example of observed versus latent variable. Now each one of us looks for happiness. So if I have to capture happiness or measure happiness, I cannot simply go and ask, are you happy? So if I have to measure the concept or the construct of happiness, happiness is not a concept. Is it a concept or a construct? Anybody? Happiness, is it a concept or a construct?
I think construct because it varies from individual to individual.
Very nice. Absolutely, Dr. Reena. So happiness is a social phenomena, it's a behavioral phenomena, and it has multiple meanings, multiple definitions, multiple ways to measure. Some people say that you cannot measure happiness because there are thousands and thousands of different perspectives around it. But some people say yes, we can. So happiness is a construct, and you are measuring happiness by maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 statements, and all these statements are based on the observed variable. Correct. So all these statements which you are asking to the respondents will be called as your observed variables or statements, and the center point will be the latent variable, which is nothing but happiness. Now let's talk about what is the concept of theory. Now theory is again a relationship or interrelation of concepts or propositions. So basically theory means you have multiple constructs. Here I should rather write construct. So interrelated constructs and propositions. Correct. So when you have multiple variables, you are trying to find out this goes there, and these three links. So you have a theory. Correct. And theory is centered around that one dependent variable largely. So theory is basically the relationship between the constructs, and that relationship is called as either proposition or hypothesis. Theories are the generalizations we make about the variables and their associated relationship. There are many theories: social cognitive theory, theory X and theory Y, motivation, leadership, and so on and so forth. You keep on counting. There may be numerous theories around you. So they are nothing but they are trying to figure out the relationship between those constructs. Correct. And most of the times, whenever we perform research, it is always said that your research must be backed by a good, strong theoretical argument. So it has to be there that your variables must come out of. And again, now people nowadays say that should I go with only a single theory or should I use multiple theories? So the answer generally is that you may go for 2 or 3 theories together to create a model of your own research. But the one theory should be used as what you call as fundamental, so that one theory should remain sustained throughout this research. It should not happen that you are jumping between the theories, you're juggling between the theories. So you may use 2 to 3 theories, but one theory should be centered. Correct. Now beyond theory there is something called as a model. So a model is defined as you may have multiple theories from where you may take some ideas. You may say conservative resource theory, you may say leadership theory. So you may use multiple theories. And is it visible? I think I've done some mistake.
No, it's not visible now.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I think I've pressed escape button by mistake. So let me share my screen once again.
It's okay.
So I was saying that model is slightly broader than theory also. And but the model is largely the researcher's creation. Correct. Researcher may use 3 to 4 theories, integrate them, synthesize them, and then say that this is my model. Is it now visible?
No, sir.
I think it will take a couple of seconds to come. So I'm saying models, they differ from theories. Why? Because theories, the role of the theory is explanation, whereas the role of the model is to represent. I think it is written in the slide point number 2. So models differ from theory. Theory act as the rational, what do you call as entity, whereas the model of the researcher is the graphical representation of independent, dependent, the relationship, the hypothesis, and all that. So a model may have multiple independent, multiple dependent, multiple intervening, maybe moderation, and it may be derived from more than one theory. Correct. So you may have 2 theories, 3 theories to back up this model. So you will say theory 1 says this x1 and x2 leads to y1, and x1 and x2 leads to y2. Theory 2 says x2 and x3 leads to this and this. So you may integrate 2, 3 theories in order to create your own model, so that you make some addition, some extension, some contribution to the existing literature. Correct. So this is the agenda behind the entire research that we do. So I think now these concepts are clear. The concept of concept, construct, variable, theory, model, proposition, hypothesis. These are the fundamental terms. People can speak for these on these terms for hours also. But just to give you a glimpse of what my understanding is, I have just I ran you through all these. Similarly, people are also confused between these 3 terms: research questions, research objectives, and research hypothesis. Normally, you start your research by asking a set of questions, and then from those questions you derive the objectives. From those objectives you derive the hypothesis. The questions are the refined problems, objectives are the statements specific to the problem, and hypothesis is an unproven statement which a researcher wants to prove. So I think these 3 things are again an integral part of any research that we perform. I think this is again the repetition. I can skip this slide. Again, hypothesis, null and alternate, I can skip. Any questions on these 3, 4 terms? Any questions so far? Chaliye, nil. So now, from this basic understanding of fundamental jargons, let's come on to the concept of construct now. Now, many times people may say constructs. तो constructs क्या होते हैं? Constructs can be unidimensional, constructs can be multiple dimensional. Unidimensional means a construct can be measured using 1 statement, 2 statement, 3 statement, although in 99% of the cases a construct is measured by more than 3 statements. And this is what Likert has said in his research. Francis Likert has said that if you are performing or using Likert scale, you have to measure the construct on more than 3 statements. But nowadays people say wherever they see 5-point scale or 7-point scale, they say it's a Likert scale. No, it's not that way. Likert scale is it can be 5-point or 7-point or 6 points, whatever you may use, but it actually says that you are trying to measure a construct by more than 3 statements. Why does it so? Because a construct may have different interpretation, different meaning. So if you want to make your construct more robust, you have to add number of statements to that. So the robustness of the construct will come from the number of statements that you add. If you have 3, 4, 5, so it says at least 3 statements should be must. But nowadays people contest that it can be unidimensional, unit statement also, correct? So it can have both. Now let's talk about how do we measure the construct. Have you heard of this term called as formative and reflective construct? Anybody? Construct can be of two types. Now, if it is a unidimensional construct, that means there is only one statement. So I think nothing to worry. If there is a one statement to measure one variable, you can ask what is your weight, what is your salary, all that stuff. But then these are not constructs. These are actually the straightforward questions. The moment I am saying construct, so generally it is referred as a multi statement. Again इसमें दो चीजें हैं, one is multi statement and second is multi dimension. So a construct can have sub constructs or you can call them as dimensions, and under each dimension you may have statements, correct? For example, concept of learning organization, if you go by one of the researchers, they say that it has about 6 sub constructs and each sub construct has about 6 statements. So total construct, if you want to measure, you have to measure using 36 statements. But it is a multi-dimensional and each dimension is multi-statement. So I'm saying a construct becomes multi-dimensional. It may not be, but it should be multi-statement. Correct. I'm saying stress. So I can, if simply asking by how are you stressed or what is stress, it is not a construct. It is a question. So these are the 4 things that we need to understand. You are making use of items to measure a construct. Item का मतलब है single statement. Items are manifested by the construct or items define the construct. So whatever items you are asking, whatever statements you are asking, they should define, they should manifest the overall construct. But the biggest question here is, now if you have visualized this, you have some statements and then you have a construct. The third point, if you understand, where should the causality flow? Again, causality. So causality, should it flow from the statements to the construct or construct to the statement? Did you get my question? So point number 3, I am asking, if I am using a multi-statement construct, I am saying maybe a phenomena of anger or creativity. So if I am asking 5 statements around creativity, mathematically if I have to represent or graphically if I have to represent, should those 5 statements will go into the construct or construct से arrow जाएगा statement की तरफ? Any thoughts? Because
So
most
5
of
statements to construct. 5 statements are leading to that construct.
Why? Why not it should go from construct to the statement?
Sir, as these are the causative factors.
So that means those 5 statements are causing that construct, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. But if I say, if you possess that construct or if you exhibit that construct, you will exhibit those 5 behaviors. It may be otherwise also, na? If I'm asking somebody ki if you are stressed, you will have these 5 symptoms, these 5 behavior, these 5 things. So that in that case, the arrows should move from the construct to the statements also. Now here, हाँ बताइए.
But I think it shouldn't be in this way.
Chalo.
As
I think if you
some
have heard of,
symptoms are giving that construct, na? For example, stress is analyzed or judged by few symptoms. So I think these 5 symptoms will lead
no,
to this
देखो
stress.
symptom नहीं देखो, there are 2 things. One is causes of stress. If they are the potential causes, then definitely it should come from those 5 statements to the stress. But if I am saying when a person is stressed, he exhibits these behaviors, then it should be little different. और stress को छोड़ दें अगर हम, if I say leadership, so if I have to measure somebody's leadership style, so what I am measuring? I am measuring his behaviors, his responses in a situation. How does he behave?
Sir, I would like to answer.
Yeah,
Uh,
please.
Yes, sir, I got it.
in reflective construct, sir, the statements are representing the construct.
Very right.
And the statements are highly correlated in case of reflective constructs.
Why
So
are they correlated? If they are correlated, then only one statement can do.
they
Why
are
do they need to be
related.
correlated?
They are related with each other, sir.
They are related or correlated? Definitely they are related, because all of them are contributing to one statement. Yes, they can be correlated also. Ravita ji, you are right. You are absolutely right, but you need to be a little more confident.
Yes, sir.
And in formative, see, I think you have got the essence. If I show you the next slide, it will be a little more clear. Now you look at this and try to visualize. In both the cases, I am saying there is a construct, and we are measuring the construct using a set of statements. In the first diagram, I am saying that the arrow is moving from construct to the statements. In the second, I am saying the arrow is coming from the statements and going into the construct. दोनों के दोनों में latent variable है. Construct is a latent variable and these statements are. But whenever we are performing the analysis, we need to be very sure of what was my construct type, whether it was reflective or formative. I am sure you must have heard about two terms. One is called as PLSM and second is called as MS. AMOS we call generally. Smart PLS करते हैं, एक में AMOS करते हैं. So normally there are two softwares, Smart PLS and AMOS. They both perform SEM, but the assumptions of both the softwares are different. AMOS works upon formative constructs. No, sorry, reflective constructs, and Smart PLS works upon formative constructs. उसकी बाद में बात करते हैं, चलिए वो आप बाद में सीखेंगे. अब मैं एक एग्जांपल दे रहा हूं आपको. Now in this slide there is an example. There is a construct called as religiosity. How religious you are. Correct. So in religiosity, if I have to measure religiosity, I have got two approaches. If I am saying I am using reflective approach, then what kind of statement should I ask? If I am saying I am using formative approach, what kind of statement should I ask? Attending religious services may be a reflective indicator of religiosity. Attending, so attending करते हो इसका मतलब religious हो. If you are attending the religious services, if you are going to temple, gurdwara, masjid, wherever you feel like, whichever religion you belong to, if you are attending those services, those events, those things, then it is a kind of reflective. Formative में क्या होगा? Formative का मतलब these things are forming it. Correct. Now you look at again, go back and see formative में क्या होना चाहिए. Formative में those statements will contribute to the construct. Correct. So formative के अंदर, if religiosity is defined as composing of a belief dimension, a devotional dimension, a ritual dimension. So if somebody exhibits these three dimensions, उसके beliefs कैसे हैं, उसका devotion कैसा है, उसके rituals कैसे हैं, then these three indicators will be called as the formative indicators of religiosity. Did you get it? अगर हम ये तीन चीज एग्जिबिट कर रहे हैं, अपने बिलीफ्स को, अपने डिवोशंस को, अपने रिचुअल्स को, and you are measuring these three things, then it will be called as a formative indicator. But if you are just measuring whether the person is going to the services or the events or any other occasion, then it may be called as a reflective. I hope I am able to differentiate the two. Now, whenever you are creating a questionnaire or using a scale, you need to see, क्योंकि दोनों की ना assumptions अलग-अलग हैं. Both of them have different set of assumptions and both of them have different set of analysis methods. Correct. और formative थोड़ी tough है. Okay. I think I can share one or two research paper where the entire difference is narrated. But as of now, it is important for us to understand the difference between these two. Correct. Now, this slide talks about the process of scale development. Now, again, in the scale development, also we need to be mindful on these two things. Whether I am developing a scale on formative indicators or reflective indicators. With formative, you have to see the causation where it is flowing. With reflective, you have to see the causation. So the causation is important in both the cases. Now, this is the process. I think I will not get into the process of this, but the entire essence of sharing this is that whenever I have a construct, because most of the times I will be using a construct to measure any phenomena. Whenever I have a construct, whether it is formative or reflective, I have to see the reliability and validity both. Correct. Now, this process again says that you have to start with a conceptualization, you have to get into the item creation. Again, item creation ka matlab, think around that bigger latent variable and write down the statements, whatever statement comes to your mind. If it is religiosity, if it is stress, if it is leadership, it is burnout, if it is anything. So you have to write a lot of statements. So how do we write those statements? If you have to create a questionnaire, most of the cases we get a questionnaires from some authentic resource. कि भैया so and so scale is there, so I will use it. अगर वो भी use कर रहे हो, again you have to satisfy a lot of queries. Yes, Hima Jyoti, you have a question. Hima, you have raised your hand. Dr. Reena.
Yes, sir. Sir, I wanted to ask one question in this. Should we design our own instrument, or should we use a already tested instrument which is published by a researcher for our research purposes?
See, Dr. Reena, creating your own instrument itself is a PhD. If your instrument or your construct is such a broad, for example, I remember spiritual leadership or certain sustainable things which are emerging nowadays. A lot of people are creating instruments, they are creating the scales. So development of a scale, it takes about an year time. So if you wish to develop your own scale, you have to follow these 10 steps. And I think each of these steps will take a month or so. So you have to use the content validity, you have to use the criteria validity, you have to use the discriminant convergent validity, then you have to use the reliability, then you have to do a lot of external validity also. So there are multiple steps. So basically you are going into two processes. You are first creating the number of statements, and then you are trying to minimize those statements so that your questionnaire does not loses upon the robustness, but the number of statements can be reduced. Correct. So you are using two approaches, inductive and deductive both.
That's
So,
right, sir. But for a PhD level, what do you suggest? I mean, you should, go ahead with your own instrument, or I mean, if I'm using somebody else's questionnaire and then just administering it on the respondents and collecting data and presenting it, I don't think so. It'll be a more value added approach. What do you
Reena,
think, sir?
there is it's always said that we should not reinvent the wheel. There is no fun in reinventing. If you are trying to measure a construct which has been debated, discussed, explained by multiple authors in multiple ways, so you can pick up something which suits your context, and then you can go for all kinds of validity to ensure that you have taken a rigorous process. If there are no scales available, then definitely you may have to create one.
Right, right.
So if there is no scale available, there is no choice. But if there are only limited scales, you still want to add, then you may add or maybe delete. Normally it is said that, for example, whenever there is an instrument created by somebody, so he may have sub dimensions in one questionnaire. So you can add one or two statements if you want to add, but if you delete statements and it becomes less than 3, then it should be avoided. if a subscale has 5 items or 7 items, and 2 items are not making sense to you, or they are too sensitive, you may lose responses, and you may have a fear of non-response bias, then you may delete those. But there has to be a rationale. So you may say, I did a content validity, I did a face validity, and my experts have said that it is not making sense. Or in the pilot, I did not get the response on these 3 statements. So that can be done. But if you say that I want to customize a statement, then there is a problem. So normally it is accepted if you add a couple of statements or delete from a construct. But if you are changing the wordings, then people can question, because then the essence can be lost. Whatever
Okay,
essence the statement or the questionnaire was trying to create, that can be lost. So I personally feel, if it is available and you pilot it, you speak to the experts, if they say yes, good, and speak to both. I told you, you talk to the respondents, a small group, and then you talk to some academicians also, because then with academicians you will tell them that these are the theory to rationale my model. So then they will say, if you are using this theory, there is another scale available. For example, one of my students is doing a research on unorganized learning, and he has created his own questionnaire. Yesterday evening he made a call, and he has written some 7-8 statements which are not making any sense. So I asked him, are these statements capturing all dimensions of unorganized learning? He said, sir, मेरे हिसाब से तो होगा. But then I gave him 3 more dimensions. I said कि ये कैसे measure कर रहे हो आप? इसकी जरूरत नहीं है. Then I gave him two theory or 2 articles to read. Then he said, no, sir, it is important. So my point is,
okay, sir.
It should be robust, and it should fulfill the rationality of the theory. But standardize रखोगे तो ज़्यादा अच्छा है, ठीक है ना? Because standardize का मतलब the reliability is already existed. People might have said. अब दोनों terms का difference I think is known to others. ठीक है? I think everybody is sailing on the same boat. बाकी लोग response थोड़ा कम कर रहे हैं. Thank you, Reena. I think I can move on. So in this model, I am saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps. It's 10 on the left hand side. If you see 6, first is conceptualization, second is development, third is model. So from theory to model, and then scale refinement, and then scale validation, and then you develop the norms कि भैया इस स्केल को कैसे एडमिनिस्टर करना है, कैसे उसकी रेटिंग लेनी है, कैसे उसकी स्कोरिंग करनी है. If it is little technical, so you have to create a norm of administration also. It's a very lengthy process. Right, I think I have written the same in a little easier way also. I can skip this. Now these are the points on which we will talk for the next 1 hour or so. For the newcomers, it may look little bigger or comprehensive, but I think most of the terms are known to some of you who have some idea about administering a research. So I'm saying criteria for good measurement. Measurement, again, I've said it requires a scale, and a scale may have multiple forms. Correct. It can be comparative, non-comparative, and it may use nominal, ordinal, any kind of scaling technique. Scaling technique and scale, both the things you should know. So in order to have an effective criteria, the scale should be fulfilling these 3 things. The first, the utmost thing is called as validity. The second thing is called as reliability. And the third thing is called as sensitivity. Is it sensitive enough to provoke the ideas? It should not happen that people are not at all sensitive about the statements. It is not creating any cognitive thinking in their mind. They are just saying okay. It is hardly making any what do you call as stimulus to them. So it should stimulate their thought process. In the validity, I think, as the term says, whatever you intend to measure is being measured. If I intend to measure a concept of spirituality, it should be measured. It should not happen that I am involving the concepts of religion or yoga in spirituality. So I should have a difference between these 2 terms, and I should have an operational definition, and whatever statements I am asking, they must fulfill the manifestation of the operational definition that I have in mind. Correct. And validity has again three parts. I will talk about them in the coming slides. I think I can see Hima Jyoti raising her hand. Hima Jyoti, is there something that you would like to ask? Okay, reliability, again, as the name suggests, reliability means consistency. Consistency means that if I administer the same instrument again and again, it should give me similar kind of result. I'm not saying exactly same, but similar results. That means it is consistent, it is reliable. Correct. So scale should be number one, valid. If it is not valid, everything is lost. Valid का मतलब जो आप measure कर रहे हो वो कर ही नहीं रहा. So whether people are giving same response every time you are going to them, it hardly makes a difference. But if it is valid but not reliable, then you have to see that what are the challenges. So first thing is make sure it is valid. Second is make sure it is reliable. And then third, less debated, less discussed, more ignored, is sensitivity. Correct. Whether it is able to ignite, whether it is able to trigger, whether it is able to excite, the sensitivity and all that. So there are three types of major validity that I have written here. The most important or the utmost is content validity. Content validity is very, very subjective. You need not to have any mathematical instrument, you need not to have the data, you need not to have any software. So content means you need to see the statements which are being asked. Many times it is also called as face validity. Although slightly difference is also there, but 90% is overlapping between face and content. So content validity includes specification about the statements, their description, their whatever, what do you call as the ambiguity, the confusion, the kind of loaded question, leading question, and much more. So you are basically evaluating the statement one by one in order to see the essence of asking the statement. Correct. So the third point says, in fact, the content validity is a subjective evaluation of the scale for its ability to measure what it is supposed to measure. Ability है but subjective है. So it may so happen that Asad Ahmed ji will say that it is not good and Dr. Reena will say it is good. Correct. So it may have subjectivity associated, but most important is the consensus of the supervisor and the student in case of PhD. In case of other research, the consensus of the co-authors. Correct. And then the backing of the theory. The second kind of validity is called as construct validity. This is little tricky, this is little difficult to achieve, and at times people avoid, ignore it, but nowadays people are now discussing about it. So construct validity, again, as the name says, you are actually looking at the construct as a whole and trying to find out whether the construct is cohesiveness. So cohesiveness of the construct is important here. Now the first line says the construct validity is the initial concept, notion, question or hypothesis that determines the data to be gathered. So in a way I am saying if there are multiple constructs within one variable, each construct should be different from each other, and within one construct all the statements should have high cohesiveness, high correlation. So within construct validity there are two things. These are called as convergent and discriminant. Convergent validity is where you are looking at whether the statements within a construct are converging with each other. Correct. So normally if you know the CFA, confirmatory factor analysis, we use something called as average variance explained, something like that, AVE values. Correct.
Yes, sir.
Similarly, discriminant validity is important to distinguish and differentiate different subconstructs. Correct. For example, emotional intelligence may have 5 subconstructs. So each subconstruct should be different from each other. Service quality questionnaire may have 5 subconstructs. So each subconstruct should be different from each other. So you tend to measure the construct validity. And again, the point to be noted is that these two validity can only be measured once you have data. In case you have not collected the data, you cannot measure these two validity. And again, there are softwares which help you in doing this, but you need to have data, and data should be, the adequacy of data should also be there. Correct. It should not be that you have only 10 statements and 5 responses. So normally it is said 10 times the number of statements, the data sample size should be there. So I think in this workshop we may not get into these, how do we mathematically calculate. In the advanced workshop we are covering using the MS, how are we calculating convergent and discriminant validity, how do we create those latent variables, what are the values to look at, how should we interpret the tables. But theoretically it is important for us to know that construct validity is equally important. I think I have explained those two concepts in much detail in this slide. The convergence validity is established when new measure correlates or converges with the other similar measures. Same thing. The literal meaning of correlation or convergence indicates the degree to which one item is correlated with the other item in the same construct. आप इसको मैनुअली भी कर सकते हो. If you have 5 statements and you just look at their correlation, so that can also be done, but discriminant you may not be able to. Correct. For that you have to create those latent variables and then administer those small techniques. So discriminant validity is established when new measuring instrument has low correlation or no convergence with the dissimilar constructs or concepts. So if there are 3 subconstructs and all of them are dissimilar, then you have to achieve the discriminant or low correlation. Same is written. The next type of validity is called as criteria. Now criteria basically means if there are multiple ways of operationalizing a construct. Correct. So it says the extent to which an operationalization of a construct relates to or predicts a theoretical representation of a construct. So if there is a theoretical representation and there is an operational representation, so how are they both correlated, how are they both associated? Correct. And again, within criteria you generally look at 2 things. I think one is predictive and one is concurrent validity. So criteria के अंदर you are trying to bridge the gap between the theoretical representation of a construct and the operationalization of a construct. Right. The second point says the criteria validity is the ability of the variable to predict the key variables. So if there is an independent, if there are 2-3 ways of measuring and then there is a dependent, so you just look at the first independent, how good it is in predicting the second, then the second, how good is predicting in the variable, and then if they are equally good, then you say the criteria validity is achieved. Correct. So it involves the determination of whether the scale is able to perform up to the expectation with respect to the variables or criteria. Criteria validity may include demographic, psychographic, and attitudinal. I think that's more or less covered. So I'm saying it includes normally 2 types of validity. One is concurrent and second is predictive. So in concurrent, you generally look at the construct at the same time. So the definition says concurrent validity refers to the degree to which operationalization correlates to the other measure of same constructs that are measured at the same time. Whereas in predictive, you try to look at the operationalization at a different time, rather at a future time. Correct. So both are generally tested. Correct. For example, now you may say that the quantitative ability or quantitative aptitude can predict your performance or overall job chances. So quantitative, if you have multiple measures, so you may use 2, 3, 4 measures, and if all measures are associated with that, then you say concurrent. But if somebody in future gets a job, then you are basically measuring the predicting the independent on the dependent for a futuristic time. Then you call it as a predictive validity also. And these two validity are normally a subset of criteria. Any questions so far? So that I can move on to the concept of reliability. I have, yeah, one hand is there. Bindu. Bindu Menon has raised a hand. Is there a question? No. So let's go on to the concept of reliability. As the name suggests, I told you that whether the consistency there in measuring the construct. So the definition says reliability is the tendency of a respondent to respond in the same or at least similar manner to the identical or near identical question. Correct. So if you have 3 statements around the same problem or same event or same behavior, then there should be some similarity in the responses. Correct. If he is giving similar answers, then chances are that it is reliable, and if he is giving different answers, then it is not reliable. Now the biggest question is, people say, if it is about consistency, that means we have to do multiple times the same research. If ideally I have to measure the consistency of my instrument, then I have to administer that instrument multiple times. Yes, in ideal case it is true that you have to or you should do your research multiple times, but that is more applicable in the case when you are developing a questionnaire. When you are developing a questionnaire, you check for the reliability at different context, at different geographies, at different point in time, and see whether you are getting similar kind of responses. But if you are using an established standardized questionnaire, standardized instrument, then there are other methods to do that. We'll talk about it. Second point says a measure is said to be reliable when it elicits the same response from the same person. I think it's done. The third point, yeah, Farhan Mustafa, there is a hand raised. Farhan Mustafa, there is. So basically, you are trying to create the consistency in the responses, and this is what the concept of Likert. Likert has also said that you should ask the same thing in more than 3 ways. If he is answering in the similar way, then chances are that it is true representative of the variable. Now, these reliability can be achieved by using 3 different tests or 3 different, what do you call as, methods. The first is called as test retest method. This is something that I've said, that you have to conduct the test for multiple times, once, twice, thrice, 4 times, and until you get similar kind of response. Second way is to use equivalent form reliability. So you may use equivalent form. Maybe you have a similar statement written in a different way. Again you go with that, again you go with that, and you say whether the correlation is there in the answers. If yes, then it is there. If no, it is not there. But the easiest approach that we generally have is called as internal consistency reliability. Internal consistency में rather than going to the people or the respondent again and again, just check whether there is a consistency in the responses that they are making or not. Correct. So I think in the next slide we are talking about all these things. Any questions so far? So in test retest reliability, the closeness of the agreement between the results, I think I've said, if there are 3 attempts, 4 attempts, 5 attempts, in every attempt you get the same response. Equivalent format, you generally go with 2 equivalent forms. You construct and administer a different set of people. And if you get the same kind of responses, then you say that yes, my instrument is reliable. But the third is more commonly used, and most of us know it with the name called as Cronbach alpha, or simply alpha. So internal consistency reliability is used to measure or assess the reliability of a summated scale. If you have a summated scale is nothing but a kind of Likert. Likert is a subset of summated. Even if you are using Simmental or some other scales, so they are also summated scales, where you have several items and there can be a sum of the items. So whenever you are trying to measure the reliability, you may use internal consistency. So the basic approach to use or to administer this is called as split half. Now this is a technique which is already created and fed into the software in SPSS. Whenever we run Cronbach alpha, so it already uses the concept called as split half. So what is the meaning of split half? So for example, in one construct, you have 6 items and you want to check the reliability on those 6 items. So basically, those 6 items they will have a kind of similar response. For example, all items are around the work culture. So if I am not happy with a couple of things, so chances are I may not happy with all. So what does it do? It does multiple iterations by splitting the entire construct into 2 parts, and every time it checks the, basically if there are 6 items, 3 plus 3, so 3 ka correlation with other 3, then it will use a random another 3, another 3, another 3, another 3. So whatever permutation combination it will create, so for all combination it will compare the correlation between both the groups, and if it finds that all the correlations are good, so normally it is said that the alpha value or Cronbach alpha of 0.7 and above is good. So basically we are saying that there is 70% cohesiveness in the construct, in the responses of the construct, correct? So here you are basically not going to the respondents again, you are neither creating another construct, similar construct, but you are saying that, but iske andar dekho, the essence is, if you have large number of statements, maybe 20, 30, 40, you will find the reliability value will always be very good. There is normally a tendency that if you have a questionnaire which has 30, 40, 50 items, and if you run the Cronbach, you fed all the items together in Cronbach alpha, and then you say my alpha is 0.9 or 0.8, and then you report it. But ideally it is not the way. If there are sub constructs, so you have to check the value of Cronbach alpha for each of the sub construct. So lesser the item, chances are more the deviation, and more the deviation, less the Cronbach alpha value. So you should always persist your students, if they have, or if you are a scholar or researcher, you should always prefer that you are measuring the split half reliability Cronbach alpha on subscales rather than a complete questionnaire. If a subscale has 5 item or 4 item or 6 item or 3 item, use that only. And it is difficult. If on those 4, 5, 6 item the consistency is not there, then there is a challenge. The third point says, in this technique, the items are divided into equivalent groups. If it is even number of statements, then equal group. If it is odd number of statements, then equivalent group. This division is done on some predefined aspects as odd versus even number questions, and then split them randomly. So software automatically randomly splits all after the division is made, and then it checks for the correlation between those splits. If it is high, then it is good. If it is low, then it is not so good. Okay, na? So high correlation means high consistency, low correlation means low consistency. Subjectivity इसमें नहीं आएगी. Subjective in the process splitting. So I think if you are doing it manually, then there is subjectivity, but if you are giving to a software, then it will do it within predefined algorithm. And a very common approach to deal with this problem is Cronbach alpha or only alpha, coefficient alpha. Now the next thing that generally people ignore is called as generalizability. Any doubts in reliability so far? Should I do that on SPSS file once? I think what I can do is after this 10-15 minutes of discussion, I will perform you those 2-3 things.
Yes, it will be better, sir.
Yeah, Asaji, I will do that because in the morning session also I've talked about missing value frequency and all that. That can be performed, and Cronbach alpha I can also perform on SPSS. Okay.
Yes.
Correct. Thank you. So generalizability is a measure on how useful your study for the broader. So generalizability means external validity. So can you, again, it is nothing but inference and how broad group can take benefit of your study. So you generally recommend it that the study can be performed on a different sample. So normally it is suggested that you should have a broad heterogeneous group so that the generalizability can be achieved. But if you are using an homogeneous group, then chances are that you may not be able to achieve the external validity or generalizability. So it is also a point to be noted that how generalizable your findings are. And the last thing that I've said was sensitivity. Sensitivity is the ability of measuring an instrument. I think I've so told you that you should be able to create that excitement. Otherwise, people will generally use and go for central tendency or extreme biases. So they may have their own biases. Correct. And you should avoid dichotomous responses where people are not even able to think cognitively. I think this is the theoretical part. Now we'll get into the practical part. Any questions in the theoretical part? You let me know so that I can handle those. Otherwise, I can just show you an SPSS data file and perform both the things that we discussed in the morning, and the things that I've just said. Although the concept of construct validity may not be possible, because for that you have to use software called as MS, but I can at least show you a data file of SPSS. Give me a minute. How many of you have SPSS installed in their systems as of now? I can see one hand. Marian.
I think most of them should be having because we have shared the link, trial version of that SPSS.
Good. Now I'm showing you a dummy data file. The system is pretty slow. There are a couple of hands. Is there any question, or you are raising just to ensure that you have SPSS activated? It's taking some time. It's coming. Maybe you can take a minute break, water break or bio break. We can come back in 2 minutes. Can we take that, Asad?
Sure, sure.
Yeah, I think it is taking. My system has got stuck. This file is
Now,
not even
I
opening.
can understand these softwares usually do sometimes.
Yeah, I think there are multiple files which are open and it is taking little more than usual time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe we can have a 2 minute break.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
3:50 we can meet. 3:45 as of now I can see the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, 350 will be meeting. No issue.
Chaliye, perfect.
Hello, Asad sir. Please share the link of feedback link.
Yes, Satyakam will share because
Yeah,
the,
I was
th-
just waiting for that. Yeah, sir.
the third session, na?
Yeah, yeah. This is the third session, sir.
Yeah,
Ji.
we'll just sharing the that feedback link at the end of the session.
Okay, okay. No issue, sir. Definitely. Thank you, sir.
I have shared my screen. Is it visible? It may take a minute.
Yes, yes, Dr. Sunil is visible.
So it's a dummy data file. And I'm sure if you are familiarized with what is SPSS and how does it work, let me give you a just brief glimpse. So it's like an MS Excel document, and it normally contains two views. You can see at the bottom, like in Excel, you have multiple files, multiple sheets. It has only two sheets basically. First is called as data view, and second is called as variable view. In the variable view, it is important for us to define those variables. In SPSS, if you are aware of, whatever is the top cell or the first row, it becomes the header or the variable name. But here the first row starts from the second, the first data start from the second row. So we need to define all the variables in the variable view, and there are multiple items on which we have to define. So for example, you have to define the name, then what is the type of the variable. You click on the right side of the cell, you will have this pop-up, and this pop-up will say what kind of variable is it. Is it dot, comma, numeric, custom, string? Since we are largely using SPSS for the quantitative analysis, so we say it's numeric. And then width and the breadth, width of the cell, and decimal up to 2 decimal places, up to 1, up to 3. So again, you can choose, correct. You can click on the button and it can increase or decrease the number of decimal places. In the label, you can actually write the entire statement. So here, for example, I have written 6 S1, S2, S3, all 8 statements in codes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So in the label, so whenever you will make an analysis, the label will be shown rather than the name, because this name has a lot of constraints. The constraint in terms of number of alphabets, in terms of special character space. So this name is generally a short form of the entire statement name. So you can put the entire statement. And then if it is a nominal or ordinal scale, then we have to prescribe the values. This is nothing but it is called as the coding. The moment I have, for example, now here I have a statement called as age, a statement, a variable called as age. So if I say, if you can look at this measure towards the end, the second last column. So if I say age is ordinal, ordinal means I have 4 kinds or 3 kinds of categories in age, and I say 15 to 25, 25 to 30, 35 to 50, whatever. So the moment I have given ordinal, then I have to give these values, right? You can see I have as of now none. So then here I have to prescribe that 1 is for which group. So you may say less than 25. 2 is for between 25 and, correct, between 25, 26 to 60 maybe. 3 is for above 60. Just giving you a demonstration on how do we enter the variables. I'm sure most of you would be aware of it. So now 1, 2 and 3. Now if you go to the data view for the variable number 9, as of now it is nothing. So here the moment I write 1, 2, 3, sorry, 4 is nothing, so it will say basically, right. Now here I can actually see that 2 means what means what. So there is a button at the top, you can see 1 and A, so it says value labels. The moment I just click on this, it shows what is the actual meaning of 1, what is the actual meaning of 2, correct. So SPSS does not take any, what do you call as string, if you are analyzing the numeric data. So I'm saying it is now numeric. So now this age becomes a ordinal variable. Similarly, you may have some variables which are nominal also, but nominal ones we generally avoid for any analysis, because nominal has no other benefit other than a label, correct. For example, it can be registration number or code or something. So normally the analysis is performed between the ordinal values or variables and scale variables. Whenever I say scale, as I told you in the morning session also, out of 4 scaling techniques, interval and ratio, both are clubbed together under scale. Correct. So in the first 8, if you can see, the measure is written as scale. So that means whatever value I give. So if you look at the data view, there are some values 3.5, 4.5, whatever. All of them are now scale. Scale means it can either be interval or ratio, because there is no difference of absolute zero, which is known to the software. And then alignment and column and missing, I think these are not very important, but you may use them if required. And then role, most of them are input because you generally use them. But if you create some variables, then the role automatically changes. Input, target, both, none. I will talk about it. They have different features. So the point that I was making was that if you have to check the reliability and use the software. So now, for example, I have one construct, and that construct has got 8 statements. So from 1 to 8, and I want to see whether these 8 statements have high reliability or less. Generally, I use the analyze. Can you see that? In analyze tab, I go to scale, and at the top there is something called as reliability analysis. The moment I click on this, you will have a pop-up where you have 2 boxes. So you select whatever items or the statements you want to check. For example, for all these 8 statements, because all of them are a part of one construct. So I want to see all these 8 statements. If you want to choose some statistics along with that, you can choose, I want to see their mean, median also, I want to see the description also, I want to do some other tests. As of now, I will not do anything. And generally, I told you it follows alpha. Alpha is a kind of split half, but there is a separate split half also. There is a Gutman parallel, strict parallel. So most common method or approach that we use is called as alpha. The moment you say OK, there is a new output window that opens up. And in this output window, you just look at the second table. In the first table, it generally says what are the valid entries and what are the excluded entries. So all entries are valid, there is no missing. So you need not exclude anything. So you can see Cronbach alpha is 0.798 on number of items 8. Correct. I actually told you initially also that more the number of items, the chances are that there will be a. I think my output window is not visible, right? Because I have
Yes, sir.
only
It,
shared
it is
one
not.
screen. So let me share the entire screen with you. I think that's a better approach. Is it visible now, my screen?
Not yet, sir.
Sorry, wait just a minute.
Yeah, it's fine.
So this was my data file, and I told you there are 2 views, variable view and data view. So in variable view, I define all the variables. In data view, either I import an Excel file, or I copy and paste, or I import any other kind of file. Normally people either import. So from file, you can import a data file also, right? So in the open, you can open a data file, and then you can, from there you can import also an Excel sheet. But as of now, I have not imported anything. I have just copied and pasted these entries. The point that I was making was that the output that it shows, there are 2 tables in the output. If you can see the screen, the first table says case processing summary. So number of cases, number of valid cases, number of excluded. Excluded means it's written, there is something called as A. A says list-wise deletion based upon or variables. So there is no, generally there are some excluded variables where there is a missing entry or some other we might have mentioned. There is no exclusion here. And the overall, if you look at the reliability statistics, 0.798. Now this is by using Cronbach alpha. Now, for example, I use another different method. Rather than alpha, I say Gutman, and I say okay. Gutman method में it actually says if I remove 11698, if I remove second item, it is 813. If I remove third item, if I remove fourth item, so basically overall this thing is given. But it actually says that there are 6 different based upon certain calculations. So normally people generally say that I will go for the highest value. So they say I've gone for lambda 6. Right. So there are multiple methods, but most common approach that people use is the Cronbach alpha. I hope you are able to perform this. For example, I use split half. Let us see how does it show. In split half, it says part 1 672, part 2 673. Overall, it says coefficient is 782. In the first method, it was showing overall 798. 798, 782, not much of a difference, but slightly different. So I think if you compare all these methods, the Cronbach alpha generally gives the highest value of Cronbach, and that is why people prefer it the most. Correct. I think now what we can do is we can actually do the missing data analysis that we explained and discussed in the first session. Can we do that? Now, for example, as of now, I don't need this age variable. This was just to explain you. So I can just right click and I can just clear this. So this will go from here and it will go from the data view also. So now, for example, I delete some of these entries. Now I told you that in case of nominal and ordinal, generally it is preferred that you go back to the respondent and look at the actual value. But in case of ratio, you can use the imputation. Remember, for example, I have deleted a lot of items. Correct. One more thing I should do here is I should actually remove these decimals because they are confusing. Normally the response is in absolute term rather than decimal. Correct. So if you go to the data view, for example, you have got some responses from how many people? It is 118. So there are 118 respondents that you can see on the x-axis, sorry, y-axis. On the x-axis, you see S1 to S8, and there are multiple missing items. I am randomly deleting some of the items just to perform the analysis. Normally, people miss out. Correct. I think, deleted some of the items randomly from all the statements. Now, if you are aware of, there are two kinds of analysis which are available on SPSS. If you go to analyze, there are two tabs at the bottom, lower bottom. One is missing value analysis and second is multiple imputation. So the analysis will perform largely the analysis for you, that from which statement the values are missing highest, which respondent has missed highest, overall what is the missing frequency, missing percentage, and in the missing imputation, it analyzes the patterns and then replaces the values, and it can give you a new file with imputation. So I think we can do both one by one. Missing value analysis. So अच्छा ये प्रोडक्टिव पर्सनालिटी क्यों दिख रहा है? Let me also delete this as of now. I can just delete this label because it is creating some. Correct. I have got 8 statements. Just want to see the patterns. So display में it will calculate the tabulated cases grouped by missing value pattern. Correct. So So now you can see it is giving you a lot of patterns. It says statement number 3, 3 missing. Statement number 6, 3 missing, 4 missing, 13 missing in S1, 2 missing. So these are the number of cases and these are the statements. So there is a tabulated pattern. You can ask for the graphs also. I think graphs I have not asked as of now. Create graphs here. Estimation अभी नहीं चाहिए मुझे. Estimation basically it will give the answers also. Graphs का option आता है I guess somewhere. I think it will come in the second wala. So here you only see the pattern, the entire tabulated pattern, that for which statement how many cases are missing. Pattern with less than 1% case are not displayed. So we have put a cap that with 1% or less missing don't display. Patterns are sorted on missing patterns, variables are sorted. This is just to see the overall pattern, but largely we will use the second wala tab, that is multiple imputation. So here you go and you just click on analyze patterns. You select all, you drag them in the analysis window or the box, and then you are asking for these 3 things: summary of missing values, pattern of missing value, variables with highest frequency missing value. Here again you can give some options: maximum number of variables displayed 25%. You can maybe increase or reduce based upon your convenient. Because we have wireless, so I think I have to use maybe 0 here. Next number of variables should be all. Now can you see those graphs? This is the graph that I was referring to. Can you see these graphs?
Yes, sir.
Now it says in the first graph, I think a lot of other variables are coming. I've asked for much more. So in this graph, you can see it says out of 8 variables, 7 variables have some missing values, and only 1 variable has no missing values. There were 8 variables, so 7 variables have some missing, only 1 variable has no missing. And if you look at the cases come out of the number of respondents. So out of 80 plus 38, that is 118 responses. 80 responses have got no missing. So that means 80 respondents have completely given full answers. Only 38 respondents have some missed values. Correct. Which is 32% of the respondents have missed value, that is either 1 or 2. And if you look at the total it is saying total values are 898 plus 46, which is multiplication of both the two. But it says less than 5% of the data is missing, 4.873, and 95% data is complete. So I think in the morning session, one of the participants said that we generally put a cap that up to 5%, up to 10%, if it is missing, it is ignored. But ignored means you either have to substitute them or delete them. If you do not ignore that, that means you are going back to the people and asking for the response. So ignored basically means you are, because if you have to further do the convergent validity and all those analysis, you need a file which is complete in nature. Correct. Now in the below table it shows the pattern summary also. So it says S2 is the only variable where there is no missing at all. It says na, out of 8 variables only 1 variable has no missing, S7 has missing. So S2 is the variable. So that means S2 जो statement है ना आपकी वो बहुत मतलब it is a statement where people are comfortably answering. maybe there is a statement, for example, the statement number S7 or S1, where highest people have not what do you call as responded, highest missing. S1 में आपको क्या प्रॉब्लम है, S7 में क्या इश्यूज हैं. So for example, S3 there are only 2 missing. Correct. So you actually have to look at that. And then the statement where the highest missing, just read that statement once again and try to rectify if there is something which you can avoid. इसको भी छोड़ देते हैं. कंप्लीट रिस्पॉन्सेज टोटल इतने हैं 12% के अंदर अप टू दिस परसेंट, 7% में अप टू दिस. दिस इज द टेबल ऑफ मिसिंग वैल्यू पैटर्न एंड टोटल सम. I think I have done it twice. नीचे भी आ रहा है सेम ग्राफ. Correct. So this graphs will give you the analysis, but if you have to now do the substitute or imputation, then you go to the second tab, multiple imputation, impute missing data values. The moment you click on this, so you say S2 में तो कोई missing है ही नहीं, so you can avoid S2. If you want to send it there, you can do, but S2 has no missing value. Correct. So there are these 7 variables where there are missing values. Now it is asking कितनी imputation करना है. So I told you ना, you can perform single imputation and multiple imputation. So if it is using regression, so it will use 5 times regression, and whatever is the answer coming, so it may take an average. So you may say 1 imputation ही करो, 2 मत करो, 3 मत करो. So here basically it will give you a new table or a new data set with 5 different values. Correct. So if I say maybe 2 imputation, correct. Now where do you want the imputed data? You want the data in a new sheet or the same data file? I am saying कि इसको अभी यहीं रखो, but create a new data set. Correct. So 2 imputation करा रहा हूँ, 2 या 3 whatever you want to do. हालांकि लोग 1 भी कराते हैं. Correct.
So imputation means can you please repeat once again?
Imputation का मतलब है substitute basically. Impute का मतलब I am imputing whatever is the missing value, I am substituting that value with a method. Impute करना है आपको. If you know SEM also, so generally in the SEM you create a latent variable and you impute that variable. EFA भी करते हैं ना हम लोग, कभी किया होगा अगर आपने factor analysis. So whatever is the value of the factor, it imputes. Impute का मतलब सिंपल है कि वो आपकी values जहाँ पे missing है वहाँ entry आ जाएगी. So all those missing values you will get an exact answer.
But what will be the value? That we don't know.
That we should know.
Okay.
So number of imputation is also important in this replacing.
Yeah, that is what I am saying. देखो, if you have a small data set, then you only go for one imputation only. But if you have a large data set, then what will it do? It will split the data set into maybe 3, 4, 5. If you say 5, so it will basically run regressions multiple times. So in the first regression, it came up with a regression line, and in that regression line, wherever was the missing value, so it takes that value from that line and replaces it. Now let me go back to the data sheet. Hold on. So in the data sheet, if you see S36, S39, there are missing. तो अभी S3 को हमें fill करना है. So I want to impute S36 and I want to impute S39. Correct. So these two values I can impute it by the average mean of this entire series. I think there is somebody who is talking in between. Can we mute that person? Swati Chaudhary, can you mute yourself?
तो फिर मैं घर जाके बस एक दिन लूंगी मैक्सिमम खत्म.
Miss Swati Chaudhary, please mute yourself.
Correct. I think the objective of imputation is basically substitute these missing values. Now I told you there are normally 2 methods. One is mean and second is regression. Regression में क्या करेगा ये? इसका एक estimation create करेगा using a straight line. So based upon this data, it will predict this value कि अगर ये 3 है, ये 3 है, ये 4 है, 4 है, so it will create a regression line on this variable, and wherever this missing value will be there, so it will try to substitute that. So now you have to basically suggest which method to be used. So I have said all variables, create a new data sheet. A data set. Data set कौन सा? After generating a data set containing the inputted value, you can use spaces. A, B, C. So I have created a new data set and the name is ABC. So now here basically it is asking you which method we should use. If you say automatic, automatically it will scan the entire data and looks at the possibilities, whether it should be imputed with the series mean or some regression methods or some interpolation or extrapolation. But if you use custom, custom के अंदर ये दो तरीके हैं इसके पास. One is called as MC, which is fully conditional specimen, and second is called as monotone. Monotone और दोनों में क्या फर्क है? Monotone basically says when it identifies specific patterns. कि भैया for statement number 3 maximum missing are there, for respondent number 28 maximum missing are there. If it identifies specific patterns, then it will deploy a different method of imputation. But if it is saying fully conditional, that means it is not looking at the specific patterns, monotone patterns in the missing. So if your missing data has some specific patterns, then it will apply a different method. But if it is there are no pattern that you want him to do, then it will go for fully specified. But the best is you ask him to do automatic. So automatic में ये कुछ पूछेगा नहीं आपसे. तो जब custom पे जाओगे, then it will ask you which method you want to use, and then under this you see there are two methods. I told you largely there are two methods. One is mean and second is regression. So in mean it will either use the series mean or 5-point up and down or the entire range mean or something like that. Regression mein it will simply run a regression line, and wherever it will draw or find the points, it will substitute that with those values, correct, which are falling on that line. So normally in this thing ratio data we go for the linear regression, but if you just say automatic, then it will do it on its own, correct, because a lot of algorithms are already there. So as of now I am saying automatic. If you want to use constraints also, you say in S1 this much is missing, this many is missing, so you only do that. So constraints are when you want to use. अब जो next वाली table है, this is important. Now I told you it is using regression. So regression के लिए it has to have independent and dependent. Correct. For example S1 में कोई missing data है, so S1 का missing value predict करेगा ये बाकी सब S2, S3, S4. So now you can restrict it also कि S1 का use सिर्फ impute करने के लिए है. It should not be used as predictor, or it can be used only as predictor. So basically you are saying to predict the missing values in S1 by using all other variables as predictor, correct. So you may decide the role of each of the variables, that this variable is playing both the roles. So you have three options: impute and use as predictor. So it will, whatever is missing in this, it will get imputed, and for others it will act as a predictor. If you say only impute, then it will not act as a predictor to other, but others will act as imputer to S1. if you use it only as predictor, then it will only use it as a predictor. So there are three options, but largely we say it is both, because in my case I do not see any difference. But if you see that there is S2 which is not to be imputed, अगर मैं यहाँ पे डाल दूँ S2 को and I say कि only S2 को use करो because S2 is the only complete variable, so only use S2 as predictor and others only as impute. Did you get it? So I have now dragged S2 also. So in the method, in the constraint, now I will say कि S2 is only predictor and all others are only impute. सिर्फ S2 को यूज करके बाकी सब में जितनी मिसिंग वैल्यूज हैं उसको प्रिडिक्ट करो. Did you get it? This is the best way. If you have even one variable which is complete in all, so that can become as a predictor and others can only used as impute only. What I am doing is I am just changing the role from both to impute only, and the S2, since it was completely no missing entries, so this is used only as predictor. This is a constraint that I have applied. Correct. यहाँ पर भी आप कर सकते हो कि कितनी मिसिंग है और कितने % आपको मिसिंग छोड़नी है या रखनी है, बट here as of now I am not saying anything. So it will scan the data और यहाँ पर आपको आंसर भी दे देगा कितने % मिसिंग है. तो परसेंटेज मिसिंग, ऑब्जर्व मिसिंग, ये सब तो आपको मालूम था पहले, हमने कर लिया ऑलरेडी. ठीक है, हमने यहाँ पर इसको कंस्ट्रेंट भी डिफाइन कर दिए. आउटपुट के अंदर आपको इम्पुटेशन मॉडल चाहिए, largely yes. The moment you say okay, now if you go back to your data file, how many entries did we have? 138?
So I guess 118 it was.
118, right. Now you can see I have got another file, correct? I have saved this file as ABC. You can see untitled in bracket ABC. So if you look at the file now, so first 118 statements are the same which were there from till here 118, right? Now 119 onwards, you can see there are some cells which are highlighted with gray color. Can you see 3, 4, 3, 3, 3, 5? Now these are the values which are now imputed. You have the old file also and you have the imputed values also. Can you see 5, 4, 3, 4, 3, these gray files, gray cells. So now these gray cells are nothing but the imputed values of all those missing. Now since I have said I want two imputation, multiplication, so it has given me 2. So 118 into 3. So now the total number of rows will become 118 into 3. So कितना हो जाएगा? Maybe something से ज़्यादा कर दिया इसने, 5-6 imputation किया इसने. So if you say only one imputation, so it will show you two different data sets. One is the original data set and second is the imputed data set. Did you get it? So you can see 0 दिख रहा है आपको यहाँ पर. There is a new column added, imputation. So the value is 0 till 118. 119 onwards the value is 1. So that means it is the first imputation. If you go down, it says imputation 2. If you say imputation 3, 4, I think हमने 5 ही किया है पूरा. It is now total 708 values. So 5 बार imputation किया है, and if you want to verify कि imputation number 5 में इस value का कोई difference है, if they are all same, then you can use any. But if they are different, then you use these 5 new imputed values and take an average and then replace in the original file. Correct. So imputation के अंदर आपको number of imputation बताना पड़ेगा. If you want to be more rigorous, if you want to have high what do you call as preciseness, then you go for higher number of imputation, but then it is increasing your burden. Then you have to take an average of all or whatever is maybe deeming fit to your data. So if you want to say it is 4 is better, कुछ जगह 4 दे रहा होगा या missing को 3 की जगह, then you retain the 4 one. So which one you want to retain, or you want to take an average of all and then replace, so then that option also you have. Correct? Am I making sense? Yes guys, am I making sense? So what we have done, let me revise it.
Yes, sir.
So what we have done is, we had a simple data file. So in the analyze, we went on to, if you just want to see missing value kitni hai, kaisi hai, then you just don't click on missing value analysis. It will give you a tabular form. This statement, this percentage is missing, but that will not serve the purpose. You want to see and you want to replace also. So you generally go to multiple imputation. You go to impute missing data values. You start with the variables. Now there are 4 buttons at the top if you see. So variables कौन से हैं? These are the 8 variables. You can see imputation 5. If I say only one imputation, then it will not give me those big data files. Then it will give me 118 into 2. Correct. Now you are saying a new data sheet create karo, and the file name is ABC. So it will automatically create a new data sheet for you. The old will not be disturbed. The old data sheet will be retained. New data sheet you will get both the existing entries values and the new values. This is step number 1. Step number 2, ABC को नहीं मान रहा है, चलो हो गया वो. Step number 2, you have 2 options of imputation method. One is automatic, so it will automatically scan your data and look for whether there are some patterns in the missing data, or whether it is randomly missing, whether the data is maybe nominal, ordinal, interval, whatever. So if it is nominal, then it will look for maybe the last digit, उसकी ऊपर वाली वैल्यू क्या थी, नीचे वाली वैल्यू क्या थी. So it will replace it with the closest value, or it will use some mean. So automatic में you don't have much choices. In the custom you can select the method and you can select the model type scale variable. It can either be predictive mean matching or it can be linear regression. So predictive mean matching में it will look for the means. So it will automatically predict the missing value by looking at the means of either the one cell above, one cell below, or the entire range, based upon what kind of pattern it sees. If there is only one missing in the entire range, so it will take the entire range mean and place it. But if there are multiple missing, then it will see कि missing कहाँ आती है, whether there are 3 back-to-back missing, whether there is one only missing. So then it will look for the monotonous patterns, and based upon that it will replace. So these 2 methods you need to understand their what you call as maths behind, the stats behind. But the best way is go for the automatic. In the constraint, this is nothing. ये तो आपको एक scan करके data को बता रहा है कितने % missing है, so that you know that which variable has missing, which variable has no missing. Based upon this summary, then you can define the role of the variables. Which variable is impute only, which variable is predictor, which variable plays both the roles. And once it is done, then you go to the output. Imputation model आपको output में चाहिए, you can ask for it, and then it is done. ठीक है. I think this practical makes some help. Will it help?
Yes, sir.
See, those convergent and discriminant validity are also important, but that cannot be done in this session. For that you have to maybe come in the advanced session, where we will understand the basics of MS first, and then what are the things that we should do to create those values. Correct? Average, variance explained, and all those. Chali, I think we are done with the topic, and we are done with the time also. In case there are a couple of questions that I can address in the limited time. See, Aarti, face validity is, I told you, it is close to content validity. हालांकि face में you only look at the aesthetic value. Correct? Whether these statements are well placed, whether their sequence is good, whether they are able to excite and command the attention of the respondent. Whereas in content you do face plus some more what do you call as technical aspects of the statements. So when you do content validity, so in a way you are doing face plus the other technical things about the statement, whether the statement is capturing the essence of what you want to capture. Correct. So face is more creating the aesthetic value. Rahul Kumar, you have raised your
Yeah,
hand. You can ask.
yes, sir. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Sir, in reliability analysis, suppose I have questions like dichotomous nature in my questionnaire. So, in reliability, am I supposed to check the reliability for all the questions or only for the scale type question?
See, I told you reliability is done only for the constructs. Constructs के
Only
अलावा
scale.
किसी के you cannot check the reliability of the demographic questions. No. Constructs maybe you have to select each construct separately. If your questionnaire has 5 sub-constructs, so each 5 sub-constructs should be checked separately. You have to avoid the other statements where these are nominal or ordinal or any other demographic. Correct?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any other? See guys, I will be sharing 2 papers, and I think that makes a lot of sense. The first paper that I will share is on the concept of endogeneity, because to be very honest, I have also sensed that it requires more attention, because I have told you the theoretical part of it, but exactly mathematically कैसे करना है, that paper will clarify all your doubts. And second paper I will share with you on what is the difference between the uh, formative and reflective constructs, and if you have to analyze which is the better way. So whenever you are creating a questionnaire or instrument, you should be able to reflect upon those things, that it should be a reflective measure or formative measure. So those 2 papers I will share. Asaji, I can mail it to you, or
Yeah, yeah, sure, you can.
so that can be shared with the participants, correct?
Sure, sure, sure.
Chali, with this, I think I should leave because I have to go somewhere urgently. In
I
case there are no
understand.
such question, no further question, I can now.
Now,
I can be approachable. I can give you my email ID. Let me write it in the
yeah,
chat
it is better,
box.
sir. It's better. The participants will reach out to you directly.
Yeah, you can reach out to me. How do I chat box? Let me type it. So there is one podcast that you should see if you just type this name, John Antonakis. I will just type the name, Antonakis, Nakis. Podcast on endogeneity. He has explained it brilliantly. You will actually enjoy listening to him. So thank you, Vikramji, for the feedback, and look forward to your responses. If you have any doubt, any query, you can reach out to me. And this author, he has multiple papers, John Antonkis. So if you read these papers, you will understand the science behind endogeneity and why 80% people are not even bothered about it. ठीक है, चलिए, thank you so much. Wish you
Okay, okay.
a happy week.
Dr. Sunil, we are very thankful to you for your time.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. See you
So
next.
we'll just meet again,
Assalamu
inshallah.
alaikum. Bye. Inshallah.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Thank
you.
you. So, participants, again, one say request to all of you that whenever you are asking questions, at least at that moment of time, please turn on your camera. Right? It doesn't look